Hello. Today I would like to show you all the improvements we have made to FigmaToBabylonjs, the Figma plugin. So let's get started, and I want to introduce people to how you would bring in what you export with the plugin over to your BabylonJS project. So this obviously is Figma. I have made a very ugly rough design here, and this is my BabylonJS project. It's just a plane with a shader on it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to click on the frame that we want to export. I'll open up the plugin. You can use the hotkey Alt-Command-P if you use the plugin. That's to open your last plugin. Right now, I'm just going to export this as is, and we'll talk about the new features in a second. So I'm going to export this. It'll take a second. And then it will take whatever the frame name was as the JSON file. So this is just hud.json. I'll say save. Place. And then we're going to go into the code to actually tell it to use this new HUD. So make sure that you have the advanced dynamic texture included in your project. And I'm going to first call this the main window GUI, and I'm going to require it to get the HUD.json. Then I'm going to make an advanced texture variable and an advanced dynamic texture. I am going to inform that dynamic, and then I'm going to set that dynamic texture to be a full screen UI. And lastly, I am going to then pass a serialized object, which is the main window GUI from the JSON. So if I save that and give my Webpack a second to compile that, when we go over to the code, when we go over to the Babylon project, we should see it reload. And here is our GUI. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you about some of the new features. All of this was already existing in the previous versions of FigmaToBabylonjs. Number one, and kind of the headline feature, I would say, is that we now allow you to bring in images. So here's a little crosshair, let's just call it. I'm just going to center that in the screen. Most games like to have a crosshair to shoot things at. And let's say right now this missions box in the top right corner, that's a gradient. However, I could use an image instead. So I'll bring this image over. I'm just going to pop it in there. It's going to be a bit ugly. I'm just going to pop it into the background for now just to show. And I'm just going to just put it, again, this is a bit ugly. Obviously, I'd do a better job if I was doing this professionally. But there you go. Just put an image there. So now to bring in the pictures, again, I'm going to bring up the plugin. And you might have already noticed that we have an include images checkbox here. So we can click on that. And something else we want to check out is we actually go over to the images tab here, and we can tell it to scale, to what size. Because I'm currently on a MacBook, I like to get everything at least ×2 to make it look good on Retina displays. If you need it higher for Ultra HD, you can do that as well. I'm just going to stick to ×2. And define the image folder here. So again, I'm going to export this as a full screen advanced dynamic texture. I'll talk about the control only later. So let's export that. And you can see it's processing 2 images. Now, something you'll notice is this is no longer a .json file. This is actually a .zip. And the reason for that is because the images are in there. So what I can do, I can show you that here. I'll go into the project itself. And see my HUD.zip there. I'm going to just open it up. There we go, unzipped. And if I go into the HUD, you can see here I have the HUD.json from before. So I'm going to copy both of these over. And if you look in images, you can see the 2 images I have are in there. So I'm going to just copy these over, Control C, go over. I'm just going to Control V it here. And I'm just going to say replace, apply for all replace. There we go. Now if I look at my images folder, you can see I got my 2 images in there. And my HUD.json should have updated. I'm going to clean up, just get rid of these because I don't need them anymore. And it should have automatically updated. So let's just go straight over to the project. And look at that. I have my image here of the map, and I have my crosshair in the middle of the screen. So this is a pretty powerful feature now. I'm really happy with it. Obviously, you can do so much more now, and you could even make, not everything needs to be a gradient. So you might notice before, in my first version, I made this little like mana bar and this, I don't know, Diablo style mana ball in the middle here. These are all gradients, and the coin up here, these are all gradients. I did that because, I couldn't use images, but now I can use images. So, the sky's the limit. I'm sure people who are much better at art would be able to make some really cool stuff with this. Now, something else I want to do, I'm going to get rid of the picture here, and I want to talk about some of the more, I wouldn't say advanced features, but kind of features that are hard to explain in text. So you might notice here, I have these items here. Now these are supposed to be checkboxes. But if I go over to the Babylon project, you'll notice these are not checkboxes. The pause button here is a button. These are buttons because I marked them as buttons. However, now what I can do, again, bring up the plugin. If you go to identifiers, I can actually not only just mark buttons, which was in the previous versions, I can now mark what is a scroll view and what is a checkbox tag. So for the checkbox, we can test that quickly, and I'm going to do that by this is a component in Figma. I'm just going to go to the main source, and I'm going to call this checkbox -chk. And again, you can make this whatever you want it to be. I made it default chk, but you can make it whatever you want. And because I've updated it here, it should update throughout all my components. So if I click down here, you'll notice if I go into item 2, yep, it says checkbox. I can see the -chk. And we can quickly show this off now. So I'm going to again open up the plugin. And even though I have the picture now in the middle of the screen, I still have the crosshair. I don't need to include images every time. The include images is, the wording might be wrong. It probably should say export images, because as long as I don't change the image folder here, it will still mark this to look in this images for whatever the layer is called. If I was to rename this as something different, it would break it. But if I don't rename it and I just say export the advanced dynamic texture and say save, replace. All right, go over to the Babylon project. Wait for it to update, and I'll know it updates because the map picture should go. This old paper image should go. Okay, the old map picture has gone. The crosshair is still there though, as you see, and because I marked everything as check, these should be now checkboxes. Look at that. The checkboxes, what you can and cannot style them with in Babylon's a little bit limited. Essentially what it does, it has a fill color and a stroke, and whatever the stroke color is will also be its selected fill color. I believe you can modify this further in the JSON, but you can't really do much with it in Figma right now. But again, this is quite helpful as a starter. Now, the big thing is, okay, well, the crosshair in the middle makes sense for a HUD, and this might make sense for a HUD. But as you can see, this missions here, this is actually, it's got a little checkbox here. Sorry, a little crosshair, a cross out here. So the idea is that you should be able to bring this up and hide it whenever you want. Also, what if I have more than one mission? More than 3 missions, I should say. What happens? Well, I can show you what happens in Figma if I'm to add more. Let's just say, I'm just going to duplicate this. Now, they go down in a nice list here, and the reason for that is because this is in a Figma frame. And you can actually see in, BabylonJS, if I go over to the GUI, UI, root, I can actually see my entire UI here, and I can go to the missions pop-up here, content, items. Oh, you can see it there actually. The items here, this is a stack panel. And that's because it knows that Figma was using a auto, it's called an auto layout when frames do it. This, see here, it's an auto layout and it's going down. Figma knows that this should be a stack panel, and the stack panel should be 15 pixels apart. So we have the stack panel here. And what I want to do is actually make this into a recyclable component. So to do that, I am going to go to my Figma file. So first things first, I'm actually going to cut this and put it onto its own artboard or frame. So here we go, put it into its own frame, paste it. Okay, and I'm going to quickly, just so we see the update immediately, I'm going to update the HUD. There we go, export it. But I still want this missions up here. Now, and there's actually a few things I want to do. Obviously, it's not acceptable to have all my content just go off the side here. Now, there's a few ways to do this. I could try to make the missions fit the size of the content. However, that's not very scalable because what if I have 100? I don't want it to go on for 100. And I don't want to program in a whole bunch of logic around it. So what I would rather do is make this into a scroll area or a scroll view. So what I'm going to do is, and this is a little bit tricky, remember that you saw that I allow you to now mark off a scroll view. However, I cannot go to items here and say, oh, you are a scroll. I can't do that only because in BabylonJS, a scroll view cannot also be a stack panel. So I'm going to have to kind of make a new grouping for this essentially. So what I can do, a quick little cheaty way to do this, is I'm going to just Command G to make a group. But I actually want the group to be a frame. Boom, there we go. And now this frame I am going to call scroll area. And I'll give it the scroll tag. And ideally, this should now be a scroll view, and inside the scroll view should be items. Now, as you might know, a scroll view, which right now it won't actually work because the scroll view is as big as the content, so I actually have to make this smaller. And you can see there it's got clipping on it to about this size here. And, oh, it's cut off a little bit of the side. I can quickly fix that. Maybe I'm making it a little bit bigger. Maybe just centering you. Well, anyway, this is something I can fix up later. I'm not going to waste too much time now trying to fix this. I guess if I add some padding on the side, that might work. There we go. Okay. Now, I'm going to click on the actual, instead of clicking on the whole frame, I am now just going to click on the missions area, missions pop up. And I am going to export the background color, I think. I'll explain that later, but and I am going to, I export the background color, I should mention now, because if you notice here, the parent frame, it has a fill. If I want the parent frame to inherit a fill, I have to tell it to inherit the background color, but I'm going to export this as a control only. Now, a control only is a little bit different because I can't use this as a full screen texture, and if I try to, it would break, and if I try to parse it, it would actually break the code. So I'm going to save this as missions popup.json. And nothing will change in the Babylon.js yet, obviously, because I have to include it in code. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in the missions pop-up. So I'm going to say, bring in another const. I'll call it missions. And I want to bring in the missions underscore pop-up. So what I need to do now is create a new variable. I'm going to call it mission comp for mission component, or maybe mission control, I'll call it. And what this is, it's a container, and in the container I am passing, not the main window GUI, I'm going to pass in the missions. There we go. And I do pass the missions into, I pass the missions and I use the advanced texture still. All right, and then I've got to add this to the main scene. So I'm going to say this dot advanced texture dot add control, and I'm going to add in mission control. There we go. And I believe that should work. So let's just save and go over to the main app. Wait for it to load. And there we go. Now you can actually see this has made a scroll view on both the X and the Y axis, which I didn't want. The way I would fix that is I would essentially just have to make this scroll area here, make this a bit larger, and there'll be a bit of back and forth, a little bit of tiddling around with it, but it is possible to fix it. And I should make this go all the way to the end. Let's see if that works. Again, very easy to test. I'll just again, just remember that I have to export this as the control, not as an advanced dynamic texture. Save it, replace. And there might be a bit of this back and forth. Something else I like to do if I'm kind of in an issue where the component isn't correctly acting the way I expect it to. Like another problem I just noticed is the missions for some reason isn't centered. So a way I would try to quickly debug that in BabylonJS. I'll wait for it to reload, sorry, before I continue. There we go. There we go. That worked. Again, the scroll's a little bit ugly. And you'll notice that when I scroll, the whole camera is moving. That's an easy fix. All you need to do is find the scroller, and then say whenever it's being like pointed down or interacted with, detach the camera controls and reattach the camera controls. That's the way I do that. So when I'm trying to quickly debug problems like this, where my missions isn't in the middle, what I will do is I would actually open up go to the GUI in the inspector, click on the UI. Oh, and maybe just to help people, to get the inspector on, what you have to do on your main UI, and what you have to do is basically essentially, there you go, grab your current scene. I keep my GUI on a separate scene, so I say GUI scene.debug layer.show. That will then allow you to have the debugger or the inspector open. I personally, as you can see, I actually run two scenes at once. I run whatever the current scene is. That's the scene with the colorful plane. And then I have my GUI on top of that. That's just personally how I like to do it. I like to have my UI running on a separate scene. It's much easier then to manage it. But anyway, what I do then when I'm in my GUI, I can just press on the pencil icon here, and then it will open my GUI in a BabylonJS UI editor. So this is very nice. As I say, it brings in everything. It even brings in the pictures, which is great. And here I can kind of debug problems I might be having. So yeah, with the scroll, I'm like, oh, the scroll doesn't look great. I'd like it to be a little bit smaller, Oh, I can see here that you can see it kind of has a little issue where if I make it too small, it brings up the bottom one. I can play with the scroll values. So if you think the scroller is too sensitive, you can actually adjust the wheel precision down here. And you can even edit how thick this bar is. So let's say I think that bar is a little bit too hard to hit. I can make it maybe 40 pixels big, or maybe I want it thin, like 10 pixels. I want to change its color. So right now in the Figma, I can't like update its color because where would I reference that from? So you can go to here and say, actually, I want a hot red bar or something. And as you can see here, I've actually updated the color of my scroll bar here. Now, I'll also show you quickly how you can actually reference the content in here. And ideally, this actually would be empty and you would update this content dynamically via code. However, I'll show you how to quickly grab these. So what I would do is I have before I add my mission control, I would actually I would actually make a reference to, like, let's just call this all missions. Now, all missions will go to mission control dot get descendants. So that, as you can imagine, it gets everything that's inside of my mission control. And for each control that has that is called items, and if you'll notice in here, again, it's very useful to use the inspector. I can go to my missions, and it's inside the scroll area. It's called items. So it should only grab items, and then I'll have my items as all the missions will be in my items, and it has an array index of 1. Just in case it returns more than 1 item, it shouldn't, but just in case, just catch the first one. And then my all missions, if I could just console.log it, I believe. All missions. Just save that, and I'll bring up. Okay, and you see that my scene is here, and if you look at my console.log, I have the stack panel there. It's called items, and just to make sure it's the right one, I can click on it, find children. There's my children, open it up, and look at that item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And of course, then you can, in code, you can do whatever you want with this. So, I could say, all missions dot. And then again, I would say get descendants. And I can just copy the code from here. And instead of say items, I would say, oh, you know what? I want to get item 1. I believe it was called item 1, item space 1. And of course, there's better ways you could do this. I'm doing it very quickly as a demo. And I would just say, let first item equals that. And then, I can do whatever I want with it. So let's just, first item dot, I'm just going to, just destroy it. Or dispose, I should say. BabylonJS terminology. I'm just going to dispose of it. And now, when I load up the project, it should be missing it should be missing item 1, which was collect coins. So let's see that run. And there you go. You can see that collect coins is gone. And there's other ways you can actually reference items. You could also use I believe there's a find control function. But this is just to give you an example about how powerful this could be if you decide to, prototype your UI first in Figma, or use Figma as a central source of truth for your designs in your BabylonJS projects. As always, please feel free to let me know in the comments or reach out to me on the BabylonJS forums if you'd like to ask any questions or you would like some more information about anything. And please let me know if you'd be interested in seeing more advanced GUI tactics and methods. I have been working on a pretty data-intensive GUI project, and there's quite a few things I've been doing to dynamically populate GUI via JSON, not just the designs, but actually the content. And if you're interested in that, please let me know, and I might make a video about it. Thank you all for watching, and again, have a great time.